who am I, is not Soham Bhavana. Soham Bhavana is the meditation I am He, that is, I am God or Brahman. Before filling a tub with water, do we not carefully look for any holes and outlets and plug them? Otherwise, most of our efforts to fill it will be in vain. Similarly, before we start to explain the technique of self-inquiry, it is necessary to find out the many ways in which it should not be practiced, and to dismiss the various wrong ways in which it has already been understood and practiced up till now. There is a difference between the technique of the self-inquiry revealed by Sri Bhagavan and that of the self-inquiry which we have learnt from the Sastras all this time. For ages past, the Sastras have been declaring, "Who are you? You are not the body, prana, mind, intellect, ego, or the like. You are self, Atman. You are consciousness, which is self." However, they do not go beyond telling us, eliminate the 5 sheaths which are non-self, as not I, neti, neti. They do not explain who is to eliminate or the practical method how to eliminate, nor do they give in a precise and direct manner the proper clues to eliminate the non-self. Sastras can help only so far in former times. After studying the Sastras, aspirants used to seek the company, satsang, of a Jnana guru and serve him with great faith and love. Then, after the secret clues had been revealed by the guru, the aspirants were able to find out the correct way of eliminating the non-self, the 5 sheaths. That is why even those who have made an extensive study of Vedanta are found to be devoid of the practical experience of jnana, which is the loss of the ego, the I am the body, consciousness, dehatma buddhi. This is not only the case with those who study the Sastras and yet are not given to practice, but it is also the case with those earnest seekers who are sincerely attempting to put into practice what they have learnt from the Sastras. Though they repeatedly struggle in their thwarted attempts, they are not able to achieve the direct experience of the non-dual knowledge. On the other hand, jnanis, who are permanently established in the natural self-consciousness, assert that experience of self is here, now, and ever attained. The reason why Sri Bhagavan and those of his disciples who came to him solely for the experience of self-knowledge rejoice and exclaim, "Ah! Knowing self is the easiest thing. Indeed, it is the easiest," must be that on the path of self-inquiry, some new clue which is refined and easy to put into practice has been given by Sri Bhagavan. Let us see what this clue is. The body is not I. Who am I? I am He. Deham naham, koham, soham. This is the quintessence of the self-inquiry found in the Sastras, to facilitate which they lay down the following 4 practices, sadhanas. First, discrimination, viveka, between the eternal and the ephemeral. Second, desirelessness, viragya, towards the various enjoyments in this world and in any other world. Third, the 6 virtues of tranquility, sama, and so on. Fourth, intense yearning for liberation, mumukshutva. The 6 virtues, A. Tranquility, sama, means fixing the mind upon its target, with the help of the desirelessness arising out of repeated reflection upon the defects of worldly objects. B. Restraint of the senses, dhamma, means controlling the sense organs and organs of action, and thereby preventing them from leaving their respective places. C. Withdrawal from activities, uparati, means fixing the mind on its target so firmly that it is not led by previous tendencies to dwell upon objects, and thereby giving up all unnecessary activities. D. Forbearance, titiksha, means courageously enduring any amount of misery that may befell one, without trying to avoid it or grieving over it. E. Faith, shraddha, means an unshakable conviction that only the words of Vedanta Sastras and those of the Guru are true. F. Contemplation, samadhi, means preventing the mind by all efforts from wandering according to its nature and fixing it only on Brahman. Because an aspirant comes to know through the discrimination between the eternal and the ephemeral that liberation is the only eternal thing, nityavastu, he gains intense yearning for liberation and, having thereby acquired desirelessness towards all other enjoyments, he puts forth his efforts in the practice of the 6 virtues of tranquility, and so on. Therefore, in the 3rd sadhana, the 6 virtues, the sastras give him all the aids they can for the attainment of self-knowledge. Thus, when he puts forth his efforts in this 3rd sadhana, is it not clear that he has already completed the 1st, 2nd, and 4th sadhanas? Controlling the sense organs and the organs of action through desirelessness, vairagya, and trying to fix the wavering mind on Brahman are the 2 essential points among the 6 items of the 3rd sadhana. But while practicing, what exactly does a ripe and tremendously earnest aspirant do? His main practice can only be to fight with desires for sense, objects, and to think about a 2nd or 3rd person thing which he thinks to be Brahman, the absolute reality. For this, the only aids given to him by the sastras are the Mahavakyas such as I am Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi, I am he, Soham, and that thou art, Tatwam Asi. When meditation, bhavana, upon the Mahavakyas is practiced, the efforts of the aspirant are merely flowing in the form of a thought, this I is that Brahman, towards a 2nd or 3rd person. This thought is only a mental activity, mano vritti. In these meditations, I am Brahman, or I am that. What he feels as I is nothing but the mind, which he takes to be himself, because he who now meditates is the first thought, which has risen only after sleep came to an end, while the Brahman on which he meditates is a 3rd person object which can come into existence only after his rising. So long as the ego, the I am the body consciousness, lasts, when one hears the word Brahman, one can only take it to denote one of the 2nd or 3rd persons and not any other thing, I, not the 1st person feeling, because in the sentence I am Brahman, since I is already there to denote the 1st person, the word Brahman can only be taken to mean either a 2nd or a 3rd person. When closely scrutinized, meditations such as I am he or I am Brahman are thus found to be nothing but an activity of the mind diverging towards a 2nd or 3rd person. There is therefore a vast difference, as between a mountain and a valley, between these meditations, which are mental activities, and the self-attention taught by Bhagavan Sri Ramana, which is a stillness of mind. Let us see how. While practicing the meditation, I am Brahman, the 1st person feeling roused by the words I am is at once disturbed by the word Brahman and diverted into a 2nd or 3rd person feeling. Solely to avoid this trouble, in his work Who Am I?, Bhagavan Sri Ramana has said, even if one incessantly thinks I, it will lead to that place, the state of Brahman. If while threading a needle, the 2 strands of the thread remain apart, even the one strand which enters the eye of the needle will be pulled out by the other. Similarly, when one meditates, I am Brahman, even the 1st person feeling roused by the words I am is disturbed, instead of being allowed to remain in self-abidence, Atma Nishtha, and pulled outwards by the word Brahman, since this word creates a 2nd or 3rd person feeling. The aspirant mistakes this subtle activity of his mind thus going on within him from the 1st person feeling to the 2nd person feeling, and from the 2nd person feeling to the 1st person feeling to be self-inquiry, Atma Vikara. When, on account of such a subtle activity, the mind sometimes lies at rest in sheer exhaustion, the aspirant mistakes this quiescence of his mind, manolaya, to be self-realization, jnana samadhi. If this were really self-realization, the I am the body identification could not revive when he wakes up. And unless the body identification were to revive, he could not resume the thread of the meditation, I am Brahman. But since the aspirant resumes meditating as soon as he wakes up, does it not prove that what he achieved through that meditation was a mere laya, a sleep-like rest? After waking up from a dream, one can in no way again identify the dream body as I. In the same manner, after awakening to self-conscious, self-realization, the jnani will not meditate, I am Brahman, since the ego is known to be false. Hence, Sri Bhagavan fittingly asks, since we are ever that, why should we forever be meditating that we are that? Does a man meditate, I am a man? Uladunarpadu, verse 36. Does a man come to know that he is a man only by meditating, I am a man, I am a man? Certainly not. Thus, since the aspirant again starts meditating, I am Brahman, it is evident that the state in which he found himself temporarily was not self-realization, the real waking. It will be worthwhile to note in this context the following conversation between Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Totapuri, when Sri Totapuri said, "This brass vessel will shine bright only if it is polished daily, so also, only by meditating upon these bhavanas daily will our mind remain pure to reflect Brahman." Sri Ramakrishna remarked, "Why to polish if the vessel is gold?" Thus the meditations I am he, I am Brahman, I am that, Soham, Aham Brahmasmi, Tat Aham, and the like are nothing but activities of the mind, pravritis. But for self-realization, this mind must be destroyed without leaving a trace. By engaging in such meditations, the mind will live for any number of ages, because activity is the food on which and by which the mind lives. It is only the attention to second and third persons that nourishes the mind. Therefore, since the mind is not annihilated by the meditations such as I am he, it will be kept alive forever, either by doing these meditations or by lapsing into quiescence, laya, whenever it is totally exhausted by such activities. Hence, because they do not bring about the annihilation of the mind, these meditations cannot be the self-inquiry taught by Sri Bhagavan, which destroys the mind once and for all. Other than this, meditating am not this, I am that may be, in some way, an aid, but can it itself be the inquiry? Uladu Narpadu, verse 28, thus asks Sri Bhagavan, how these meditations may be an aid but cannot themselves be the inquiry will be explained in the appropriate place at the end of this chapter. Sri Bhagavan does not take these meditations to be self-inquiry. Self-attention in the form who am I alone is the teaching of Sri Ramana. The method of inquiry of Sri Ramana is an attention intensely fixed on the first person, what is this I, rather than meditating I am this or I am that, knowing well that any activity given to the mind in the form of an attention to the second and third persons, like japa, dhyana, etc., will not destroy it. And in order to fulfill the aim of the Mahavakyas, Sri Bhagavan breathes a new life into the Sastras by means of his teaching, Who am I? A revelation which was not disclosed before now, through the Sastras, and which is essential for an aspirant to be able to practice self-inquiry without losing his way, has now been added to the world of Sastras by Sri Bhagavan. What is this revelation? The mind is destroyed only when it turns towards the first person. Divine lights, divine sounds, heavens such as Kailas, visions of God in form, such as Siva, the 6 yogic centers, such as Muladhara imagined in the body. Since these and all other similar objects of the senses are objects perceived by the subtle mind through the subtle 5 senses, They are the nothing but second and third person knowledges, drisya, or the seen, and none of them can be the first person knowledge, drik, or the seer. Moreover, when the mind itself, which is an aggregate of thoughts, is a second person object perceived by us, what else can the objects perceived by it be other than second or third persons? Therefore, the attention of the aspirant should be focused only on self, which always shines, even when the mind is not, and should be kept there without being allowed to be diverted towards any second or third person object. To think of second and third persons is sheer foolishness, for by thinking of second and third persons, the mental activities, manovritis, will wax. On the other hand, attending to the first person is equal to committing suicide, for only by inquiring into the first person will the ego itself die. Atma Vichara Patikam, verse 7. This is no ordinary clue. When aspirants, even those who, with intense desirelessness and a steady power of one-pointedness while attending to any undertaking, have been struggling for countless ages through ever so many births and deaths, since, not knowing the proper direction in which to make efforts, they have been attending to the useless second and third persons, are puzzled at not finding a solution. This clue of first-person attention given by Bhagavan Sri Ramana will surely be valued by them as priceless, like a heap of diamonds put into the hands of a poor man. Not only has Sri Bhagavan revealed this clue, but he has also given in his invaluable, appealing, simple, and small work, Who Am I? The exact practical process of self-inquiry to help even beginners to fix their mind on self alone without allowing it to stray towards second and third persons. This process will be found well explained in the following chapters. A treasure, though hidden under the floor of our own house, is as if non-existent for us until we come to know about it, dig it out, and enjoy it, just like the herb that was discovered by the doctor in the patient's own garden. The story of the herb. Some friends of a patient who had been suffering from an incurable disease for a long time and who was on his deathbed brought a new doctor to him. After diagnosing the disease, the doctor walked about here and there in the patient's garden and plucked a herb, by the application of which the long-standing disease was at once cured. All were wonderstruck at this and expressed their gratitude to the doctor with words of praise. It is you alone who have given him life. Though that herb was there all the time in the patient's own garden, his sufferings did not end. Was not the doctor's discovery and application of the herb as good as giving life itself to the patient? Suppose either the patient or some of his friends were to say, not fully realizing the importance of the doctor's help, "After all, what has he done? This herb was all the time in our garden." This would be exactly like the words of those who say, "Self-inquiry is already mentioned in the Sastras. What new discovery has been made by Bhagavan Sri Ramana?" If someone makes us aware of the existence of the treasure and enables us to dig it out and to enjoy it, then he is truly the one who has given it to us anew. In fact, it is he alone who has made us rich. Before that, we were certainly poor. However, there are some among us who have not been able to gain the experience of self in spite of having read about self-inquiry in the Sastras. Yet who, not knowing the invaluable help, the greatness, and the novelty of the technique of self-inquiry taught by Sri Bhagavan, ask superficially, "Self-inquiry is already mentioned in the Sastras. What new discovery has been made by Sri Bhagavan?" This is similar to the poor man saying, "Was not this treasure already there in my own house?" Though he did not know about it and thus could not dig it out and enjoy it. The reason why we say that it is similar to the statement or the poor man is that had he gained that immense treasure, known its value and experienced its joy, he would no longer be a poor man, and hence he would not have spoken so belittlingly about his friend's invaluable help. Only those pandits who have mastered the mere letter of the ancient sastras, but have never experienced even a fringe of the bliss of self through the self-inquiry taught there, can speak in such a way, since they do not know the unique greatness of the clue discovered and given to the world by Sri Ramana, the Sadguru, for following the path of self-inquiry. If they had found the correct method of practicing self-inquiry by studying the sastras for all these years, why then should they still be struggling and not obtaining the experience of self? In striking contrast to this, all those who have known the reality through the great help of the clue given by Sri Bhagavan were almost ignorant of the ancient sastras. The consciousness I am, when felt along with an adjunct, upadi, as I am so-and-so, becomes a thought. Of all thoughts, this thought is the first, but the consciousness which shines alone as I without any adjunct is self, Atman, or the absolute, Brahman. This is not a thought. It is our being, that is, our true existence. Therefore, the purpose of the Mahavakya I am Brahman, taught by the Sastras, is to give us a prior information about the final experience that Brahman is our pure existence, and not to convert Brahman into one of our thoughts. Thus, I am Brahman is only a prior intimation of our true state, which we are yet to reach. Can our existence, which is beyond thought, be reached by thought? Since it cannot be thought of, to put an end to the rising of the I, thought, through the inquiry, who am I, through self-attention, and to abide as what remains after, is the true implementation of the Mahavakya, I am Brahman. Since the reality, I, exists within, beyond thought, who can and how to meditate upon that reality, which is called the heart? To abide in the heart as it is, that is, without thought, is truly meditating upon I, thus should you know. Uladhu Narpadhu, Benedictory, verse 1. Until one gains the true experience of Brahman, Brahman Bhava, in whatever way one may meditate on Brahman, it will only be a thought about a second or third person. But instead, if one simply meditates I, since it is a first-person attention, the I thought which has thus started to meditate will drown in its source and lose its form and separate existence, just like the stick used for stirring the funeral pyre and like the reflection of the sun directed from a mirror towards the sun itself. Thus, if one takes to meditating I am Siva, Sivoham, or I am he, Soham, and so on, the ego will wax and grow strong, whereas if one attends to self, who am I? The ego will die. Man misbehaves, acting without restraint, and as he pleases, even when he only imagines I am this trifling body. If he were to imagine I am Brahman himself, of what evil would he then be incapable? Guru Ramana Vachana Mala, verse 149. That is why Bhagavan Sri Ramana did not teach I am he, Soham, as practice, sadhana. If some particulars about a town which we want to reach have been given to us beforehand, they will be a good aid. Similarly, the prior information given to us by the Mahavakya, such as I am Brahman, that our final reality is Brahman, may be a good aid, but can it be the practice, the inquiry itself? No, it cannot. How? Studying the particulars about the town, reading them repeatedly to learn them by heart, and meditating upon them can never be the journey to that place. The same is the case with the Mahavakyas. This is exactly what Sri Bhagavan meant when he wrote, meditating I am not this, I am that, may be, in some way, an aid, but can it itself be the inquiry? Uladhu Narpadhu, verse 29. Meditating we are that may be a good aid for reminding us to abide as self. Uladhu Narpadu, verse 36. Therefore, the path of inquiry, who am I, is not the meditation upon the Mahavakyas such as I am he. We often hear about some lecturers who neither have had the good fortune of being taught by the gracious glance of Sri Bhagavan's eyes, those two flames of jnana which easily reveal this truth, nor have the willingness to scrutinize thoroughly his teachings, but who, after reading Upadesa Saram and taking only the later part of the 8th verse, I am he, is better than all other meditations, start propagating that Bhagavan Ramana also teaches only the meditation I am he. It is therefore necessary to scrutinize this point a little deeper. The Tamil work Upadesa Undiyar is the original from which the Sanskrit Upadesa Saram was translated. The correct meaning of the 8th verse will become clear if we know in what context and with what purpose Sri Bhagavan composed Upadesa Undiyar. This work can be correctly understood only when viewed in the light of the context in which and the object with which it was composed. Upadesa Undiyar is so named because it is the instructions, Upadesa, composed in a Tamil meter called Undiyar. When Sri Bhagavan translated this work from his original Tamil into Sanskrit, it was named Upadesa Saram, which means the essence of instructions. It is also under this title that the English translations of Upadesa Undiyar have been published. Not knowing the context in which this work was originally composed by Sri Bhagavan, many on first reading the title assume the work to be the essence of Sri Ramana's instructions, and that he composed it of his own accord for the benefit of the world. However, after reading the next paragraph, where it will be explained why and in what context Sri Bhagavan composed this work, the reader will understand that he started to write it not as the essence of his own instructions, i.e. self-inquiry, but as the essence of the instructions given in ancient days by Lord Siva. It will also be clear that, as in the case of all his other works, Upadesa Undiyar was not composed of his own accord, but at the request of a devotee, Sri Muruganar, the wholehearted disciple of Sri Bhagavan and a great Tamil poet, while writing Sri Ramana Sanidhi Murai, in which he describes the play of Lord Siva with his devotees, was narrating in a meter called Undiyar the story of the dwellers in the Dwaraka forest in ancient days, who were performing ritualistic practices and who, on account of their deceitful egoism, had become immensely conceited, feeling that there is no God except kamya karmas. Kamya karmas, any action performed for the fulfillment of desires. In this context, it refers to the performance of rituals, instructions concerning which are found in the Purva Mimamsa, a portion of the Vedas. Thus Sri Muruganar came to the point where Lord Siva gives them instructions, Upadesa, to correct them and to show them the right path. He then realized that Bhagavan Sri Ramana, who is Arunachala Siva himself, was the only proper authority to impart the spiritual advice of Lord Siva, and therefore requested him to complete the story by writing the instructions in the remaining 30 verses allotted in the work. Hence, in continuation of the story, Bhagavan Ramana started to compose Upadesa Undiyar, the instructions given by Lord Siva to the dwellers in the Dwaraka forest in those days. In the first 2 verses, actions performed with desire, kamya karmas, are condemned. From verses 3 to 16, 13 verses in all, Sri Bhagavan has summed up all that has been said up till now in the Sastras about the 3 paths, Nishkamya Karma, Bhakti, and Raja Yoga. Within these 15 verses, the path of knowledge, Jnana Marga, is not at all mentioned by Sri Bhagavan. After giving instructions about puja and japa from verses 3 to 6, Sri Bhagavan describes the ancient methods of meditation in their order of priority in verses 7 and 8, And it is only in this context that it is said in the 8th verse, to meditate I am He is better than meditating upon Him, God, as an other. Because Sri Bhagavan was requested to recount the essence of the instructions that Lord Shiva gave in ancient days to the dwellers in the Daruka forest, it became necessary for him to summarize the ancient paths also. Therefore, verses 3 to 15, which are the teachings of Lord Shiva, should not be taken to be the teachings based upon the direct experience of Sri Bhagavan. Self-inquiry alone is the direct teaching or Sri Bhagavan. Some may ask, all right, the meditation I am He may not be the actual teaching of Sri Bhagavan, but does not the 9th verse, by the strength of such meditation, remaining in one's true existence, which is beyond the range of meditation, is the very nature of supreme devotion, imply that liberation, which is the supreme devotion, can be attained by the strength of such meditation. Now let us see what, in the course of an aspirant's practice, the strength of such meditation is, and what changes take place in him through that strength. Throughout the time the aspirant was practicing the ancient methods described in verses 3 to 7, such as puja, meditation, and so on, his mind was imagining God to be a second or third person object. The reason why the meditation I am He was prescribed was to remove this ignorance and to help the aspirant gain full faith in the words of this Mahavakya, and thereby to give him the firm conviction God is indeed the reality of the first person. The strength of such conviction is the strength of meditation, bhava bala, referred to in verse 9. However, why take to this roundabout path to gain the conviction that God or Brahman is the reality of the first person? Since the ritualists in the Daruka forest were stranded on a dead-end route, they had to be led only through such a roundabout path by Lord Shiva. But as soon as we hear the instruction of Sri Bhagavan in verse 14 of Ulathu Narpadu, only if the first person exists will the second and third persons exist. Why not we at once be convinced the second and third persons live only because of the root, the first person, and turn directly towards self? In order to bring back ultimately those aspirants who do not come to his path but direct their efforts towards second and third persons, Sri Bhagavan recommended this as the best of all the ancient methods of meditation since, as a prior information, it acts as an aid for the aspirants to turn that attention towards the first person. Suppose the owner of the cow which is tied in the other man's shed comes many times to pet it and feed it, thus making it familiar and acquainted with him. The cow will develop the conviction that he is its master. Then, after it has gained the strength of conviction, bhava bala, that he is its master, when he brings it to its own shed, it will agree to stay there only because of its prior familiarity with him. The simile of the wasp and the grub mentioned in the Sastras is meant only to illustrate the process by which the aspirant gains this strength of conviction during his practice. It should not be taken to mean that the individual soul becomes Brahman through thinking, because the state of Brahman is not a thing to be newly created from some other thing, as a wasp is created from a grub. It is our natural state, undergoing no change. The simile of the wasp and the grub, Brahmara Kitaka Nyaya. A certain variety of Indian wasp brings a grub and keeps it in its nest. Whenever the wasp comes back to the nest, it stings the grub, which in due course turns into a wasp. It is believed that the grub becomes a wasp because of constantly thinking of it through fear. This existence, i.e., Brahman, thy feet, O Ramana, is not a thing to go and unite with another thing, not a thing to become another thing, not a thing to be bored of, not a thing to be destroyed, not a thing to rise and set on any account. Sri Ramana Sahasram, verse 233. Therefore, Would it be in accordance with the eternal nature of the perfect state of Brahman to say that something can newly become that? Even the contention held that there is duality during practice and non-duality after attainment is not true. Uladu Narpadu, verse 37. After the conviction, my true existence consciousness is God or Brahman, has been well stabilized in an aspirant through the strength of such meditation. At an opportune moment, the knowledge, do I not always exist? Why then should I meditate in order to exist? Will flash, and thus his attention will be drawn back all of a sudden and fixed on his existence consciousness. This self-attention is exactly the technique of self-inquiry, since through this self-attention, the meditation, I am Brahman, has now become unnecessary. The aspirant remains in his true existence, I am, Aham Asmi, which is the state of thought-free consciousness. This is what is mentioned in verse 9. At any rate, what has to take place finally in the aspirant is self-attention, which is the self-inquiry taught by Sri Bhagavan. This love towards self, Swatma Bhakti, is the very nature of supreme devotion, Parabhakti Tattva, as mentioned in verse 9, and that is liberation. Then from verse 16 to 29, Sri Bhagavan expounds the path of knowledge. Even here, a subtle difference should be noted between the way of teaching of the Sastras and that of Sri Bhagavan. First, in verses 16 to 20, Sri Bhagavan explains clearly the method of doing the inquiry, who am I? Attending to self. Then, after giving us the understanding in verse 21 that the real thing denoted by the word I is self itself, he asserts his verdict that since the truth of I is self, the body, prana, mind, intellect, and the darkness of ignorance, all these, 5 sheaths, being insentient, jada, and non-existent, asat, are not I, that which exists, sat. Upadesa Undhyar, verse 22. This I, that is self, is always, in all the 3 states and all the 3 divisions of time, the true import of the word I, because even in sleep, where there is no ego, we are not non-existent. Upadesa Undhyar, verse 21. In ancient sastras, the process of self-inquiry is described as negating the 5 sheaths as not I, neti, neti. However, aspirants struggle not knowing how to do so. That is why Sri Bhagavan first gives us, in verses 16 to 20, the technique of attending to self, which is the means to know what I really is. Then he points out in verse 22 that negating the 5 sheaths is the outcome of knowing the real I. He thus implies that attending to I, self, is itself the method of negating the 5 sheaths, the non-self. Hence, in Upadesa Undhyar, Sri Bhagavan has amended the path of knowledge, Jnana Marga, by rearranging the back-to-front process described in ancient sastras into a new and practical order, that is, that which was given as the practice, neti, is now pointed out to be the result I. Thus, from verse 16 to 29, Sri Bhagavan teaches that the inquiry, who am I, is the correct path of knowledge, and concludes Upadesa Undhyar by declaring in verse 30 that the only right tapas is to know and remain in self, and not anything else.